Hey, this is Matt Cox, and I'm a con man. For those of you that don't know, I was incarcerated for 12 and a half years. The crimes were all related to running various types of scams. Basically, they were all bank fraud related charges. I got out about a year ago. This is the grind. But before we get into all that, do me a favor. Subscribe to the channel, share the video, hit the like button, leave a comment. I try and respond to all the comments. And yeah, if you can think of anything else that will help me boost my subscribers and viewers, do it. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to try and do as few cuts as possible here. I was actually talking to a buddy of mine, and he said he barely cuts his videos at all. And he says it's not a problem. The problem is I screw up a lot. I'm going to try not to screw up, but if I do, I'm going to just try and run right through it. With that said, I'm going to basically go over all the reasons why running a scam is a major issue. I get a lot of guys in the comment section that ask me like, hey, can I talk to you on the phone? And I've actually, yeah, all right, what's up? And I've actually talked to some of these guys on the phone. I've texted some of these guys, and they're literally asking me like how to run a scam. Like, hey, can you help me run a scam? I've actually had a guy, actually it's not even true, I've had multiple guys. I've had guys who've asked me to go to lunch with them, and under the pretext of just wanted to meet you, I'm in the area, I want to buy you lunch, or I want to buy you coffee, hey, can you sign my book? And then I show up, and the next thing I know, they're trying to talk me into helping them run a scam. You know, it's ridiculous. Okay, first of all, if I was willing to be involved in running a scam and willing to be basically your co-conspirator in running some kind of real estate scam, why would I need you? Why would I split the scam with you? I just run the scam myself. And their answer is always like, oh, I'll do all the work. And what are you talking about? I'm now in your phone. I'm in your phone. My number is going to come up. I'm on federal probation. I'm really on supervised release, but whatever. It's not the point. The point is that it's going to be very easy for the feds to figure out that I'm involved. And I'm done. It's just a bad idea. The whole thing is it's ridiculous. Don't contact me. If anybody's thinking about contacting me about running a scam, don't. Here's the thing about running a scam, and this is what bothers me about most people. It's like they don't even know how to run a scam. And they don't know all the things that are involved and all the things that can go wrong when you run a scam. Even if I sat here and told you all the things and how to run the scam, you'd probably screw it up along the way. First off, I give you an example. Actually, I'll give you an example of an actual scam that I've run a bunch of times. That even in the course of this video, you'd never be able to pull it off. It'd be hilarious to see you try and pull it off. Regardless, one of the things I used to do was, and here's the scam. The scam was you create a synthetic identity or a false identity or some sort of, even a stolen identity, which is really the biggest mistake out there, is stealing someone's identity. It's the dumbest thing you could possibly do. Listen, not because I have a moral issue with stealing someone's identity. My issue is that that's a fly in the ointment that can easily catch you at any time. Whether they're getting notifications from their bank. Listen, I have a bank account and I have 2 credit cards that notify me if anyone pulls my credit. Somebody tried to apply for like a small business administration loan in my name the other day. Immediately, my email and text message, bring, 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 bring. I was like, what the hell's going on? Somebody had contacted a small business administration. They'd applied for a loan in my name. They had my social security number. They had my date of birth. I immediately contacted the small business administration and I canceled the application. I didn't pursue it, but what if I had pursued it? What if the person's identification that you've stolen pursues it? You get to the bank, you end up showing up, and bam, they grab you. I've had that happen. Listen, so here's what I'm saying. First thing you have to do is you have to come up with a game plan. You have to come up with what's the scam. And one of the scams I used to work was I would create a false identity, a synthetic identity, and then I would build up the credit, and then I would go and I would apply for 4 or 5 loans at different banks. I would apply for what's called it's a personal loan, they're personal loans. Different banks would lend you $15,000 to $20,000, and this is basically, you just go into the bank and you say, hey, look, and you provide your income documents, and they pull your credit, and if you meet the criteria, then they lend you the money. So I would go to 4 or 5 different banks, and they would, like, let's say 4 banks would lend me $15,000. Then I'd apply for a bunch of credit cards. I'd end up getting roughly, after the personal loans and the credit cards, I'd get $100,000. I'd make a few payments. I'd stop paying everybody. It wasn't my identity, so it didn't matter. I get $100,000, but it took time to set that scam up. The nice thing about that scam was that the bank typically didn't realize they'd been scammed. Someone borrowed 15 grand, they made a few payments. We called them a few times, their phone was disconnected. We contacted their work. They said they don't work there anymore. I don't know, something went wrong. Put it on his credit. That was it. It was over. The first problem with that scam is this. What is your skill set? In order to pull off that scam, you have to have a certain skill set. All right. I wrote a book about a guy named John Boziak. The name of the book is Bent. And Boziak actually just started his own YouTube channel. And actually his story, I have the narration of Boziak's story on my channel. It's called Bent, and there's a narrated version. My point is this. Boziak had a skill set that I don't possess. He was a graphic designer that knew how to use all of the equipment to make fake credit cards and fake IDs. Can you imagine what you have to do to go through all the process of figuring out how to use all the equipment and programs in order to manufacture credit cards and driver's licenses, or state driver's licenses and state IDs? That's difficult. I don't have that skill set. He has a whole skill set related to credit card fraud. I have a skill set which allows me to know the underwriting guidelines required for banks to lend money on various different products. For instance, like mortgages, personal loans, credit cards, business loans, that sort of thing. Here's what I'm saying is, in the scam I just described, the first hurdle is you have to get some type of an identification, right? You have to have an identity, all right? Unless you're going to use your identity, which is obviously stupid, or you're going to steal someone's identity, which is obviously a bad idea. There's only 2 real viable alternatives. One is that you could steal someone's identity that's not using their identity, or someone that won't stumble across the scam while you're halfway through the scam, because that's what happens sometimes, and that's a major issue. You show up at the bank and boom, they put handcuffs on you. What I was doing was, obviously I was surveying homeless people, and that's in my book. I wrote a book called Shark in the Housing Pool, and actually I'll leave the link in the description below, and I'll leave Bent's the link to Bent in the description below. I was stealing homeless people's identities, and because I knew that there was no way that they were receiving any types of alerts for credit cards, because they didn't have credit cards. They didn't have addresses. There was really no way to get in contact with them by the bank or in any way. There was really in no way was there a way to contact them. So I knew that. So these were viable identities that weren't being utilized by their actual owners. The second way was to create a synthetic identity, and a lot of times I created synthetic identities. I convinced Social Security to issue me Social Security numbers to children that didn't exist, and I figured out that whole procedure. It's funny that I actually go over that in my book, which Shark in the Housing Pool. I'll put the description below. Point is this: is that I would take those newly issued Social Security numbers, and then I would order secured credit cards in their names, and then I would make the payments for 6 months, and in 6 months I had 700 plus credit scores. And then now I've got this person that has 700 plus credit scores and they have 3 trade lines, I would get 3 secured credit cards. So I had 3 trade lines and they have 700 plus credit scores. Once that's done, I had to get a physical ID. Now, I'd created a false credit profile for this person, but when I go in the bank, they're going to want to see an ID. So I either had to buy an ID off of, let's say, some Russian website, in which who knows if you could send them $300 and never get your ID, or you have to convince the local DMV or whatever, some state DMV, to issue you an ID. Well, here's the problem. There's a whole bunch of requirements in order to get that ID, right? Now, I've gotten like 27 IDs in like 6 or 7 different states, and there's like 10 or 12 different states that require a thumbprint. So you can't go there. Florida's not one of them, but like Georgia and California, there's a bunch of these states that want a thumbprint. So you have to prove residency. I did that in a variety of ways. Sometimes I would make a fake lease, or I would make I would register to vote in that state, and then the issue is you have to see all of these things coming. What if you make a fake? I've done this before. You actually make a fake. You make a fake lease, and then you go into the DMV, and they actually issued. I did this in Alabama. They actually issued you the driver's license, but they mailed the driver's license to you. So it was being mailed to an address that didn't exist. So I'm never going to be able to get my ID. I actually had to go back in with another lease. Listen, it was just a nightmare to get that ID, because I had to then go rent a box. How do you rent the box? You don't have a driver's license. You see, there's all these different issues. My point is this: at some point, you have to go in the DMV. You have to get an ID, a real ID. How do you do that? You have to prove residency. You have to provide them your social security card. You have to provide them your birth certificate. So if you need to be able to manufacture a birth certificate or obtain a birth certificate from that homeless person or from your stolen ID, making a birth certificate is difficult. You need the seal. You have to manufacture all birth certificates come on security paper. So you have to either order the security paper. You can't manufacture the security paper. You have to order. I always had to order the security paper. Every state has different security paper that they use. You see all the levels of difficulty in order to just get the ID. And at any step, if you're caught, you've broken the law. If you already have felony convictions, now you're going to prison just for trying to get the ID. You can see the issue here. So I had to figure out, one, how to either manufacture or obtain the birth certificate, get a social security card, go into the register. I had to figure out how to prove my residency. Then I had to go into the local DMV and I had to convince them to issue me an ID using a false social security number, like a child social security number. Like I told you, I would go in the Social Security Administration and get them to issue me one. If you walk in the DMV with that, most DMVs will not issue you a driver's license with that card. For some reason, they run it through the system and they realize, hey, this social security number was recently issued. You could get yourself arrested right then. I was able to go in. There were only a few states I was actually able to go in, and I was able to get an ID using the child social security number. I mean, there are so many obstacles just to obtaining a false social security. One, a false social security number, and two, a false ID. Let's assume you actually have the skill set to obtain a false identity, and you're able to go into a DMV and get them to issue you an identification card, an ID card, not a driver's license, just an ID card. Because that's a whole nother issue. You know how many driver's license tests I've taken? In how many different states I've taken to obtain different driver's licenses? You know how many tickets I've gotten in other people's names? The point is, that's a whole nother issue. Listen, I actually went to traffic school as someone else one time because I'd gotten so many tickets in the guy's name, I was afraid I was going to lose his license. You know, I had a car in his name, I had a house in it. The point is I couldn't do it. My point is, let's assume that you actually have the skill set to obtain or to either create or steal someone's identity, obtain documentation in their name. Now you have to go and you have to open up, you have to go into the bank. Can you imagine going in the bank with a fake ID and opening a bank account? Man, that's terrifying. So you've got your plan, you've got your credit cards, you've got your ID. Your credit cards you probably won't even be able to obtain. Well, first of all, you're probably not even going to be able to steal the identity. Then you're probably not going to be able to get the credit cards. Then you're probably not going to be able to get the ID. But let's assume you can do all that, which is highly unlikely. How are you going to prove your income? Because when you go into the bank and you apply for a $20,000 loan or a $15,000 loan, they're going to ask you to prove your income. How do you prove that? You can call my employer. Can I? Is your employer registered with the business directory? Is your employer an actual business? Are they registered with the Secretary of State? You see the problems? And how do you prove what you make? Can they call your employer? Can you provide W-2s, pay stubs? Because when you walk into Bank of America and you say, hey, look, I want to apply for a $20,000 loan or a $15,000 loan, and they're going to say, okay, great, we need your last 30 days worth of pay stubs. So basically that's like your last 2 pay stubs. For this type of a loan, they only really want 30 days. So they want 2 pay stubs. So you can provide them with 2 pay stubs. Do you know how to make a pay stub? And you're going to say, oh, I've gotten pay stubs before. I know what they look like. Do you? Do you know how to calculate the year to date? How to calculate the withholdings? Because the underwriter does. The quality control specialist that works at Bank of America does. And when they put your numbers into that computer, the algorithm's going to catch it. And suddenly it doesn't make sense to them. And they call the FBI. And now you're answering questions to the FBI. Maybe it's just the local cops. Who knows? Point is, they're questions you don't want to be answering when they run your ID. Or if they figure out that you're using a false ID. Or if they bring you downtown and they fingerprint you and they run your fingerprints. And you've got a conviction. Or for some reason now they have your fingerprints attached to a false identity that you've got. That's an issue. Even if it's not a problem right now, it may be a problem in 5 years from now if you get picked up for a DUI and they run your prints. My point is this. You have to have the skill set or the ability to create false documents that back up your identity. They're going to call your employer. Who answers the phone at your employer? You can't use a cell phone to do it unless you can figure out how to register that cell phone in the business directory, which I doubt you can. But let's assume that you actually have a friend that's going to verify your employment. That's a mistake. You get your buddy who's going to say that this guy, John Doe, actually works at his tax preparation store. So I'm going to say I've worked there for 5 years. I'm going to tell the bank that. I'm going to prepare fake pay stubs that say I work there. Really? Because what happens when the FBI shows up and talks to your buddy? Oh, he won't give me up. Yeah, you're nuts. He won't give you up. But let's say he doesn't. Let's say they just walk in with your picture, which is on your driver's license, on a piece of paper, and they walk in. They go, "Do you know this guy?" Let's say his secretary is there and he's not. And they go, "Hey, is Tom here?" "No, I'm sorry, Tom's at lunch right now." "Oh, okay. Hey, do you know who this guy is?" And they go, "Oh yeah, that's Tom's buddy, John." What if they go to, where are you going to get all these documents mailed to? Okay, where are you going to get the credit cards mailed to? Oh, P.O. box. Well, you have to open up the P.O. box. Who's opening the P.O. box? Who's going to provide the ID for the P.O. box? You're telling me you're going to get your credit cards after you get your ID. The ID you may never get. So the point is this. There are so many levels of difficulty. Or you're going to get, oh, no, I know, I'll get my credit cards or maybe you live in one of these states where they mail you your driver's license. Oh, I'll have it mailed to my cousin Bob. Really? You're going to mail it to Bob? Yeah. Well, what happens when the FBI shows up and shows Bob your picture? Oh, Bob won't say it's me. I'll tell him, don't say it's me if anybody ever shows up and shows you a picture of me. Okay, what if his daughter, what if your niece, what if his daughter answers the door? What if his wife or his girlfriend answers the door? Hi, do you know this guy? Oh yeah, that's Bob's cousin, John. You're done, bro. You're hit. What if you pull into the bank parking lot and it catches your tag number on surveillance camera? Okay? Now I know a lot of people are going to say, oh, if you walk in the bank, they'll get your face and they get facial recognition. Listen, they're not going through all that. The facial recognition stuff is not that good. That's not even something that I'm even concerned about. Well, I wouldn't even be concerned about that. Unless you've been arrested multiple times and they were looking for, let's say, you were arrested multiple times and they were tracking you down for treason or something, they're probably going to grab you. They're going to run it through every system out there, but they're not grabbing you on facial recognition software because most police departments don't even have access to that type of software. And even if they went to the FBI or brought the FBI in and they ran it, even then, I'm sure it's very difficult. Point is, I wouldn't even. That's not even like a concern. My concern is all of the documentation and the proof of all that documentation. Who's answering the phone for your employer? Let's say you say, okay, well, I'm not going to get one of my friends involved. I'm not going to get him jammed up. Because look, the FBI comes in and says, look, this picture of this guy, you're saying you don't know him? Well, he stole $1 million and you verified his employment. We're going to indict you. Because if they indict your buddy, he's going to give you up. Hands down, he's giving you up. He didn't make any money. He didn't do anything. He has nothing to do with anything. But he did verify your employment. He knows he's done. He's going to prison. You're the one that got all the money. Even if you gave him 10%, let's say you made $1 million and you gave him $100,000, he's not going to go to prison and lose everything he has for you. He's not that good a friend or family member. Another thing is this. How do you even know what the guidelines are in order to qualify yourself for the loan that you're trying to borrow from the bank? How do you even know that? The particular scam I'm telling you about, basically what they require is this. They will lend you, typically, depends on the bank, it could be 12, it could be like 11,000, 15, 20, let's say $20,000. Most of these banks will lend you double whatever you make in a month. So if you have 3 trade lines, you have over 750 credit scores, they'll lend you double whatever you make a month. So if you make $6,000 a month, they'll lend you $12,000. But they won't lend you over, but if you make $11,000, which now you should qualify for $22,000, they won't lend you $22,000 because they'll only lend up to $20,000 or $15,000, whatever. So there's a maximum. The point is you have to have 3 trade lines, you have to have over like a 650 credit score, and you have to debt to income ratio. I don't even know if you could figure out how to work a debt to income ratio. It's you have to figure out how to DTI, what they call DTI. You have to figure out how to DTI. So if your DTI works out, it's a balancing act. You can't go in and say, oh, I make $25,000 a month, really. It has to be reasonable. The loan officers aren't idiots. And the worst thing about loan officers at banks is that they're not on commission. So it doesn't really matter whether you get that loan or not to them. They want you to get the loan. They have quotas they like to meet. But the bottom line is this. If they feel like something's wrong, they might look into it. So you've got a problem there. You're already giving them some kind of a fake ID, dummied up pay stubs. Now they got to call somebody. Who are they going to call? You're going to use a cell phone, or are you're going to go to something like, I used to use HQs all the time, where I would go and I get what's called it's like a region. It's like a fake office where they'll rent you office space, conference rooms. They'll accept packages. They'll answer the phone for you. They'll transfer calls. So they would actually answer the phone as my employer. And but they'll transfer the calls too. Like if they're like, is so and so there, and you tell them, hey, look, I want you to transfer any calls for this person. I would give them a list of people that work there. There's a whole lot of investing and time involved in running a scam. It's not easy. Another issue is this: once you get the money, how do you get the money out of the bank? What if they're able to track the funds? I mean, where's this money going? Are you getting the money out in cash? Have you left any fingerprints on anything? You have to understand that at some point there will be an investigation. If the investigators are any good, they're going to track down all of these leads. Where did you get all the cards mailed to? That's an address. Whose phone numbers are all of these? Where do they lead? Who verified your employment? Where are these pay stubs from? Where do these credit cards get mailed to? There's just, did I say the credit card thing twice? I don't know. There are major issues when it comes to preparing a scam and getting away with it. The other issue is this, is that every single step of the way that you've prepared your scam, every step you've taken is a potential enhancement. Let me give you an example. If you pull money out of a bank, every dollar you pull out is a money laundering charge. So you think, well, what are you talking about? Every dollar I pulled out is every time you remove money in cash from a bank that was fraudulent money, that's a money laundering count. Money laundering can get you up to 30 years? I think it's 30 years. You can get 30 years for money laundering. That's a big deal. It's a lot of time. That's game over. That's game over right there. Let's see. Look. Let me break it down like this. There's something called the Federal Sentencing Guidelines, and here's the way it works. Let's say you steal $1 million. If for instance you work for an employer and you wrote yourself a check in your name for $1 million and you deposited it in your bank, all right, you probably be a level somewhere between a level 6 and a level 8. I'm not sure exactly, and that's assuming you don't have that's assuming you don't have any prior charges. If you have a clean record, you're probably between 6 and an 8. It all depends on what charge they hit you for, right? So that wouldn't be bank fraud, it wouldn't be financial institution fraud, it wouldn't be, but it could be embezzlement, and then it depends on the type of company, by the way. It depends on the type of company. If that's a company that's in multiple different states, you could get an enhancement. Did you use a specialty device, which they'll say a computer? Did you wire transfer the money or just write yourself a check? You wire transferred it and you used your computer, that could be an enhancement. You used what they call a specialty device to transfer the money. So it's just a computer. You're thinking, what's the big deal? That's just a computer. Did you use your debit card to take money out of the bank? Well, once I put the money in the bank, I use my debit card to go buy stuff. Really? Because I forget the name of the device or the charge but every time you use your debit card, they can charge you for that. Every one of these, they can hit you. So a lot of these are just enhancements. So let's say you're at a level 6 and you use a specialty device. Bam, that's 2 more levels, let's say. Let's say if you took out over $1 million from one company, you hit your boss for $1 million, and you took that money out. That's a 2-point, and I think that's a 2-point enhancement. So you just went from 6 to 8 to 10. Now you're at 10. All right. Let's say you use the debit card. That might be a 1-level enhancement. If you actually used a false identity. Let's say you actually wrote that money or used a false identity to even remove the money, or you transferred the money out of your bank account to other people. Now, the more people you have in your conspiracy, they don't even have to be charged. The more people you have in the conspiracy, the more enhancements you get, the more levels of that they'll continue to give you enhancements. What happens is this: you think, I stole $1 million, but that'll get me maybe $1 million will get me like whatever 3 years or 4 years, whatever. You get 3. You probably end up with about 3 years if you had like around $1 million. So you say, okay, well, very quickly when you start using false identities and you start using, you created documents to support your identities, or you used a real driver's license, or you used a passport. For instance, I have passport fraud because I've gotten like 20-something passports in different people's names. And I use them. So one, just obtaining the passport is an enhancement and a charge on its own. Plus, I used it. That's another one. That's another enhancement. Why? Because he got it and then he used it. Well, a lot of these things are just ridiculous, but they keep piling up and piling up and piling up and piling up. And before you know it, that $1 million, which could have been 3 years, and you could have ended up stealing $1 million and ended up you could get 3 years in prison, but you could also steal $1 million, and depends on your lawyer, really. You could end up, let's say you end up with probation, or you end up with 3 years. Well, you think, okay, yeah, I'll do 3 years for $1 million. If I got a potential of borrowing or stealing $1 million, I'll risk 3 years. Well, that 3 years could actually it could also be 10 or 15 or 20 years. Because as they add those enhancements, every enhancement they place on you is more and more time. And before you know it, let's say the first enhancement is 1 level. That may only be an extra 9 months. But if they add that one, the next enhancement though is like 13 extra months. The next one is like 15 or 16 extra months. The next one is like 19. The next one is like 22. The next one is like 27. They increasingly get larger and larger. My point is this: once you're grabbed and you realize you fucked up, it's too late. And this is the big thing about prison too, is that prison's not that big of a deal. Like if it's white collar, it sucks. But let's say you go to prison for 2 years. If you go to prison for 2 years or 2 months, it's basically the same thing. Because in 2 months, you've lost your apartment, you've lost your car, you're just completely, your friends have taken all of your stuff. All your good buddies that you think are such good buddies, a lot of them will just rip you off completely. People are picking through your stuff. Your apartment's gone. Nobody's picking up your stuff. Maybe your girlfriend grabs your stuff. Maybe your brother grabs your stuff and it saves it for you. Maybe. You go for 2, 3, 4, 5 years, you're coming back with virtually nothing. Virtually nothing. People think, oh, no, they'll wait. And they may, with a short sentence, you may have some people hang out with you and write it out with you. But for the most part, people will just take your stuff and you'll lose everything. You'll start over with nothing. I mean, you think you're desperate now for money. Look, the problem with fraud is to do fraud correctly, which not that there is a correct way to do fraud, but in order to do it in such a way that you get big money and you have a good chance of getting away with it, it requires a significant amount of skill. It requires a significant investment, and it requires a significant amount of time to be invested. It requires money, patience, and skill. And if you have those things and you can successfully pull off a scam, you could probably successfully make a decent living too. And that's what it boils down to. The sentencing guidelines are so hard and smash you so bad that it's just not worth it. You're going to get caught. There's too many things to cover. If you could cover all those things, you could probably run a successful business. If you had that much money to invest in time, you could probably run a successful business. It's just not worth it. It's stupid. Okay, so if you liked the video, hit the like button, share the video, subscribe, buy a book. I've got multiple books, I've got multiple books out there. Shark in the Housing Pool, Bent, It's Insanity, Devil Exposed, The Program. See ya.